Japan is often viewed as a country of order, but in 1984, that illusion of safety was shattered. For 17 months, a single entity held the entire nation hostage. They didn't use bombs or armies. They used typewriters and candy. And they used a terrifying, faceless persona that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. This is the story of the Glico Moringa case, the story of the fox-eyed man, and the story of the entity that called itself the monster with 21 faces. The nightmare began on the night of March 18, 1984. Katsuhisa was the president of Ezaki Glico, one of the largest companies in Japan. He was a man who sold joy, pocket sticks, caramels, puddings. He lived in a large home with his wife and young children. At around 9 p.m., two masked men broke into the home of Ezaki's 70-year-old mother who lived next door. They tied her up and stole the key to her son's house. Armed with a pistol and a rifle, they quietly entered the CEO's home. They tied up his wife and his eldest daughter. Then they headed for the bathroom. They found Katsuhisa soaking in the tub with his two youngest children. The intruders dragged the CEO out of the water, naked and dripping wet, and forced him out of his own house at gunpoint. They shoved him into a car and vanished into the dark. The next morning, the ransom demand arrived. It was staggering: 1 billion yen in cash and 100 kilograms of gold. But this wasn't a standard kidnapping. The criminals didn't seem desperate for money. They seemed organized. 3 days later, Ezaki managed to escape. He broke loose from his ropes in an abandoned warehouse in Osaka and fled to safety. The police breathed a sigh of relief. The hostage was safe. They assumed the gang would panic and scatter, but they were wrong. The kidnapping was just the opening move. In April 1984, vehicles parked outside the Glico headquarters were suddenly set on fire. Then a container of hydrochloric acid was found inside the company building. And then the letters started coming. They were sent to major newspapers, ensuring that they would be published for the whole country to see. They were written in a mocking Osaka dialect, signed by a name taken from a classic Japanese villain, the monster with 21 faces. One letter addressed to the police read, "Dear dumb police officers, don't tell a lie. All crimes begin with a lie, as we say in Japan. Don't you know that? You seem to be at a loss." They haunted the authorities for failing to catch them. They gave clues that led nowhere. They treated the investigation like a sport. But in May, the game turned deadly. The monsters sent a letter claiming they had laced packages of candy with potassium cyanide. Panic swept Japan. Glico had to recall millions of products. Store shelves were stripped bare. The company lost $20 million virtually overnight, and hundreds of workers were laid off. And the monster? They watched it all happen and laughed. In another letter, they wrote, "The president of Glico had already gone around with his head hanging down long enough. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies. It's fun to lead a bad man's life." They declared a ceasefire on Glico, but they weren't stopping. They were just switching targets. By the fall of 1984, the monster turned its sights onto another giant, the Morinaga Candy Company. But this time, they didn't just bluff. In October, they sent a letter addressed to the moms of the nation. It chillingly stated, "We've added some special flavor. The flavor of potassium cyanide is a little better." They warned that 20 boxes of poisoned candy had been placed in stores from Tokyo to Osaka. Police scrambled to search the shelves, and this time they found them. they discovered packages of cocoa balls and angel pies that had been tampered with. Inside, the candy contained lethal doses of cyanide. But here's where the psychological horror truly sets in. The monster wasn't trying to mass murder people randomly. They were flexing their power. On the poisoned boxes, the criminals had placed polite little labels that read, "Danger, contains toxins. You'll die if you eat this." They were proving that they could kill anyone at any time, but they were choosing to warn them. It was a power trip, a demonstration of total control. Despite the letters and the public panic, the police were getting close. They had traced the group's communications and set up stakeouts. Investigators were monitoring a ransom drop on a train to Kyoto. An undercover officer noticed a man watching him. The man was well built. He had short, permed hair and sunglasses, but what stood out the most were his eyes. The officer described them as eyes like those of a fox. The fox-eyed man shadowed the police. He moved with the confidence of a professional. He boarded trains, switched cars, and watched the investigators watching him. At some point, police had him in their sights at a rest stop. He was right there, but due to a hesitation in command, or perhaps fear of blowing the larger operation, they didn't move in. The fox-eyed man slipped away into the crowd. He was never seen again. To this day, he remains the primary face of the monster, a face that exists only in a sketch. The pressure on the police was crushing. For a year and a half, they had been humiliated by a gang of candy poisoners. They had 125,000 suspects. They investigated 28,000 tips, and they had nothing. The shame was too much for Superintendent Shoji, the head of the police. On August 7, 1985, the man responsible for hunting the monster walked into his own backyard, poured kerosene over his head, and set himself on fire. It was a tragic, brutal end to a man who had simply tried to do his job. 5 days later, the monster with 21 faces sent their final letter. They didn't show remorse. They didn't apologize. They mocked him even in death. And then they delivered their final, chilling sign-off. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies. We are bad guys. That means we've got more to do than bullying companies. It's fun to lead a bad man's life. And with that, they stopped. No more letters. No more poisoned candy. The monster with 21 faces simply got bored, packaged up, and vanished. The statute of limitations for the kidnapping expired in 1995. The statute for the poisonings expired in 2000. The monster with 21 faces committed the perfect crime. They terrorized the nation, humiliated the police, and walked away without ever being identified. Was it a group of people? A disgruntled former employee? A stock market manipulation scheme? Or just a group of people who found it fun to lead a bad man's life? We will likely never know. But to this day, when you buy a box of candy in Japan, you might notice the safety seal is a little tighter than it used to be, a lingering reminder of the time when a fox-eyed man watched from the shadows, and a monster told the world, "Danger contains toxins."